Introduction to the book Night. First of all, you might want to know how to pronounce our author's name. His name is Elie, then you pronounce this Wiesel. Very strange sounding name. Elie Wiesel, male, okay? It's actually short for Eleazar, but he goes by Elie, okay? Elie Wiesel is his name. He was 15 years old when he was caught up into the Holocaust. Interestingly enough, it was very, very late in World War II, and the Germans had managed to hide the atrocities from the world. So even though it was late, it was 1943, Europe had been at war for 4 years, and yet the people in his hometown had no idea of the atrocities that the Germans had managed to hide thus far. Okay? Elie grew up in a town that is part of modern-day Romania. So on the map, it's about here. Okay, the town is called Siget, and at the time it was part of the Hungarian Empire. Okay, so it's clear over here, and like I said, it's 1943, and finally the Germans have progressed far enough, and rounded up Jews and exterminated them, and finally they're starting to arrive this far to the east where he lives. Now he grows up in a family, and he has 3 sisters. He, like a good Jewish boy, he spends his day in Hebrew school while his sisters stay home and learn domestic chores. Because of where he lives, his religion as a Jew, and because of his schooling, by the time he's 15, he actually speaks 5 languages, which makes me super jealous, okay? He actually speaks both Romanian and Hungarian. In school, he's learned German. That's super important, okay? He knows what the Germans are saying throughout the book, okay? And then, because of his family, he actually, in his home, speaks a language called Yiddish. Now, Yiddish is a funny language that's related to German, but it doesn't really have a home to it. There's no place called Yidland where Yiddish comes from. It's a language that the Jews developed when they were exiled into the southern part of Germany. And then Germany, of course, kicked them out and moved them all over. So you have communities of Yiddish speakers throughout the world. A lot of them were unfortunately exterminated. Nowadays, you still find Yiddish communities a lot in this part of the Ukraine and Belarus and southern Russia. You also have big populations of Yiddish speaker in New York and Miami, Florida, interestingly. So if you want to learn Yiddish, go to Miami, okay? So in his home he speaks Yiddish, and then as a Jewish scholar, he has learned Hebrew. Okay, so there you have it, 5 languages: Romanian, Hungarian, German, Hebrew, and Yiddish. His family is rounded up and taken by the Germans on a train, and by the time you get to chapter 2, they will be on a train. In fact, chapter 2 is the train ride, and where they go is from the town of Siget in Romania to all the way to right here in the southwestern part of Poland. This is the spot of the most notorious, most awful German concentration camp that we know about. It's Auschwitz. Okay, they are taken to Auschwitz. I want you to know right now that the moment they arrive, his mother and his youngest sister are killed, and he does not see them ever again. His other 2 sisters survive the war, but he doesn't reconnect with them for a long time. It's gonna make me cry already. He spends his time in that concentration camp with his father, but his father does not make it at the end. He survives so much, and that's so tragic because they endure so much hardship, but the father does not make it. Okay. So like I said, of the people in his family, his 2 older sisters survive, and he reconnects with them later. None of his other family survived the Holocaust. He spends 1.5 years suffering atrocities in Auschwitz. And by that time, the Russian front is moving in, and Auschwitz is about to be liberated, but the Jews want to hide the evidence. They don't want the Allies to know what really happened. And so they start to empty and evacuate those concentration camps. And so what they did is they actually force marched all the remaining people at Auschwitz. They marched them a lot, but on foot, running in the dead of winter, and then on trains, uncovered, 100 people to a cattle car. And they moved them to the city, to the concentration camp that's in southeastern Germany called Buchenwald. Buchenwald. It is there that his father is going to pass away, and it is there that the Americans arrive and liberate him and save him. At that time, he's an orphan. He is taken to Paris and does the rest of his growing up in an orphanage in Paris. He learns to speak beautiful French. So there he's at 6 languages now. Okay, I'm going to change sides. Here I go. Whee! Now, after he survived the Holocaust, he vowed that he would spend 10 years not talking about it. And he kept that vow. For 10 years, he remained silent. He studied and became a journalist, again, very fluent in French, university educated, became a writer, became a journalist. And after 10 years, he broke that vow of silence, and he wrote his experiences in the German Holocaust. He wrote that book in Yiddish, his home language. And at the time, it was 800 pages long. 800 pages long in Yiddish. Okay. He showed it to some author people that he was having a hard time getting it published. An author friend recommended cutting it down. And fortunately for us, he did. What he did was actually put it into French, and he pared it down to only 110 pages. Yay? 800 to 110? Pretty amazing. And they were able to find a publisher in Argentina, and a few thousand copies were printed. It was translated to English by somebody else. It was published in America in 1958. So 1958, more than a decade and a couple years after the war. It was not popular. What they found is that people of the generation who had lived through World War II were not interested in reliving World War II. Finally, though, it started to find an audience with the children of Holocaust survivors. Children who wanted to know what their parents had been through and to have some understanding of what that older generation went through. So after many years of not being successful, it has gone on to sell over 1 million copies, become very popular, and then the children would share it with the older generation so that they have that cathartic experience of being able to remember and then preserve these important memories. Elie Wiesel, our author, then became quite famous. He's written other books, and he has become quite a peace advocate. In fact, he traveled all over the world promoting his books, but also promoting peace. He spent a lot of time working on the Holocaust Memorial in Washington, D.C. He won the Nobel Peace Prize, I think 1989, if I'm right, Nobel Peace Prize. He was a visiting lecturer at Boston University in the United States when actually he got in a car accident and was stuck in a hospital, and his visa from France was about to expire. And so he's really worried, what should I do? So he asked the American consulate for some help. I'm so sorry, my visa is about to expire, and I'm stuck in the hospital, what would you like me to do? They offered him citizenship. They said, why don't you become a citizen? So he said, okay. And he actually lived the remainder of his life in the United States, married. And in 2006, he actually sat down with his wife, who is a fluent, native English speaker, and together they retranslated the book out of the original 110-page French version. Okay. So this edition is a new translation by Marion Wiesel, his wife, with his, by this time he speaks English as well, quite well. With his, what's that word? Approval. She would pick a word. Is this the right word? And he would say yes. That communicates the emotion that I want to. So the translation from 2006 is quite different from that 1958 version, and that's still floating around somewhere. But this is the authentic. This is how he wanted it to be said. Every word in this book packs a punch. Okay, he's going to tell you exactly what it's like. It is a hard read, but it's a beautiful read. It ends up being the favorite, I promise, of my students because it's so powerful, so lyrical, so carefully crafted, telling fragments, incredible questioning of his faith, telling you precisely, here's what I witnessed, here's what I experienced. The book is actually designated as a memoir, not an autobiography. A memoir is where you talk about a certain time period, an event in your life, but not your entire life. So I wanted you to know that. We studied genres recently. This is a memoir, and it's an incredible one. The end.